Okay, and welcome back to Talkin Knicks. I'm Tom Piccolo, recording this on a Sunday afternoon after the Knicks just finished up a 1-2 week. They lost at home to Atlanta before beating a shorthanded 76ers team in Philly, then wrapped up the week by falling at home to a Celtics team that really couldn't miss. So we're going to talk about the games a little bit, as well as Thiibs seeming to find a bit of flexibility, maybe using a little bit of his imagination in his lineups. We're going to talk about Grimes and Reddish and kind of the rotation squeeze they've got there, and a bunch more stuff. So let's do it. Let's talk Knicks. All right, joining me today is my friend and co-host Kenney Poon. Kenney, what's going on?
Hey, it's good to be here. Just enjoying the wind down of this weekend. It was a lovely weekend. Hung out with the family. There's for some reason, all of my cousins, my siblings, a lot of them are born in October and November, and it is now November. So there was some celebrating this weekend. Hit up the Science Center at Sacred Heart University right by you, Tom, and hung out for a four-year-old birthday party. So it's been wild for me. How are things going over there for you?
The Science Center. So I have not been there before, but I do have a child now, and so is that a good spot? Is that like a spot for a birthday?
Yeah, sure. It was a very interesting spot. I don't know that it was designed for with me in mind, but I found it interesting. There was some fun, uh, entertaining things to do. We shot paper rockets with some like pressurized air. There was a um, paper airplane launching mechanism that we played with a lot, probably too much, and that was a lot of fun. And then there was some other science exhibits, a lot of stuff on bats. I don't know if it's just the time of year or if that is kind of a year round thing for them, but there was a lot of stuff teaching you different things about that. A friend of the pod, Colin Abinovich, is a big bat guy, so I was going to recommend that to him.
He
But
loves
overall,
bats. He
he's a bat
loves
guy.
bats.
He is quoted in a new newspaper article as loving bats. So he's a big bat guy.
That's not fake news. And no, that sounds like a good place just for. I feel like my wife Rose would love that. Like Rose would really, that might just be date night. We might leave Miles out of it and just the two of us hit up the science exhibit at Sacred Heart. Cool. No, good weekend here too. Went to the Trumbull Trail, went for a nice long hike. Dog, baby, lot of hiking, stuff like that. It was a nice weekend. Got an extra hour of sleep, which was needed, and I actually took advantage of it, so that was good. Um, but there were also two Knicks games this weekend, so how good could it have really been? No, it was fine. It was fine. Kenny, just real quick, we'll want to run through these games. I know we don't want to get too hung up on the actual nitty gritty of them, but so first was the Hawks game. It was at home, and the Knicks lost 112-99. The score was probably, that didn't indicate kind of how much of a blowout this really was, particularly in the second half. Like, I mean, really, I should say in the third quarter specifically. But like the Knicks went up big to start this one, went up big early, and then in the back half of the second quarter, and then throughout the third quarter, they really lost it, let go of the rope, ended up getting blown out. DeJounte Murray just crushed us on the defensive end. That led to offense. He ended up with 36 points, 9 assists, 5 steals, and a block. Like, absolute monster. Anything you want to add to about that Hawks game?
Uh, not really beyond the fact that like that third quarter was some of the worst basketball I have seen played. I think it is worse than the Knicks are as a team. It was just, a disastrous quarter and in no small part due to DeJounte Murray's, disruptiveness on the defensive end, but also he was just hitting shots, which is, he's a good player. What can you do?
I mean, look, that is a really tough backcourt for our Knicks backcourt to contend with. Like, Fournier really struggled in this one. He was a game low -20, and that's going to kind of be a theme throughout this conversation. Like Fournier, he ended up playing 18 minutes and 40 seconds. It was honestly 18 minutes and 40 seconds too long. His offense, even if he were hitting, it wasn't going to make up for what he was doing on the defensive end. And, when you got Trae Young and DeJounte Murray in that opposing backcourt, like you need some guys who can get stops. Um, RJ, Jalen, Fournier, they weren't up to that task, and that's not surprising, right? I don't think so. There was a little bit of like
Also,
yeah.
yeah, just one thing, like it surprised me a little bit, but I believe they said that, DeJounte Murray had 36. I believe they said that was his career high, which, maybe I don't watch enough of DeJounte Murray, but based solely off of this game, that surprised me as a career high for him.
Yeah, I know he's like always a very balanced player. Like last season, he put up ridiculous points, totals across the board with points, rebounds, and assists. But maybe he's not like a pour it in type of player. But I feel like there was a kind of like a collective meltdown a little bit for Knicks fans after this one. Like the loss was really that bad. There's kind of that baggage where we lost to the Hawks in that first round of the playoffs when we were the 4 seed two playoffs ago. So the vibes were really bad following that game, and the Knicks didn't do much to kind of turn the car around with the beginning of that Philadelphia game. I feel like they came out kind of slow and sluggish. There was some reversion to some bad tendencies, some Randle centric offense, but I don't know. Like Kenny, halfway through that one, were you thinking like, oh, this season is really on a downward trajectory, or were you kind of keeping more of a level head throughout this one?
I mean, I feel like I am the level head guy. And the point that I keep bringing up on Twitter, because I think you're right about after the Atlanta game, like people were calling for Tibbs's head, and it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
if you, and I keep saying this all the time, but like if you laid out those games ahead of the season, we have beaten every team we're supposed to beat, and we have lost to the teams that you're supposed to lose to in every one of those games. Philadelphia, like ahead of the season, you would have said that's a game we would lose, given that in this game they were missing both James Harden and Joel Embiid. So maybe that one flips. And I know also the Knicks, I think, were the betting favorite in the Hawks game, but still, I don't know. At the beginning of the season, I think when we did the where do we think they're going to finish, I think we had the Hawks ahead of them. So like I feel like there was a certain point of the Hawks game was some of the worst. The third quarter was the worst basketball that I've seen in a very long time. But at the same time, that's like one quarter in a season. So I even like with that, and I wasn't too, I wasn't out on the season. I wasn't out on Tibbs after that. The beginning of the 76ers game did make me nervous because it did come immediately after the Hawks game, and you're hoping that they come out kind of strong and put that behind them. And at that point, I was like, maybe I was a little too lenient on them, and like maybe they are just a bad team. So it's tough to say kind of how I was feeling in the moment, because I think you are aware of this. I was only getting news from you and Greg, so I watched it later, and I was aware of how it ended, but it was a bad look.
Yeah, and I think that part of it was like Randle was struggling, and again, he was too much of a focal point in this one. Like Jalen Brunson was actually pretty solid. Like he finished, even if you're just looking at the box score, he was 7 of 15 from the field, 8 of 9 from the free throw line, 7 assists to 1 turnover. Like these are solid numbers. He was plus 11 on the game. And it's just like Julius Randle had finished with 6 turnovers. Some of them were really ugly and at key frustrating times. And I think that what turned this game around completely was when Cam Reddish and Obi Toppin came in the game. The fourth quarter completely flipped. The Knicks had a nice comeback, ended up pulling this one out. Toppin hit a couple clutch threes. Cam Reddish had some nice. He had a really nice steal at a crucial moment and finished 4 of 4 from the field. Like Cam Reddish was one of the, even though he only played 15 minutes, I felt like he was one of the most impactful players that we had in this one. And I'm one of Cam's, kind of biggest critics at times. He was awesome in this one. Like we needed him every minute of his play. So that was encouraging. Like, yeah, to your point there, the Sixers were without Harden and Embiid. So how really excited you could be about this one is you probably temper that a little, but it's better than a loss. So we'll take that. And then that brings us to the last game. It was last night at home again against the Boston Celtics. The Celtics just came out firing. I don't know if there's too much more to this one than the Celtics set their franchise record for threes made in a game. Like that, they went 27 to 51. They hit that's 53% for those counting at home. They were on fire. Some of that was insane shot making. So part of it was, yes, the Knicks had a ton of defensive breakdowns, but I think that on the offensive end, it was one of the more encouraging games I've seen. I thought that, the Knicks still put up 118 points against a solid Celtics defense. Granted, without Robert Williams, without Al Horford. So like they were kind of missing that piece in the center, and that really showed that Blake Griffin started at center. But even so, offensively, there was a lot of good. Defensively, I thought it was, some of the worst defensive execution we've had this season, but we can get into that a little later.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a point that I think went overlooked by a lot of people because again, like this was a loss, and a loss is a loss. But the Knicks offensively, like they performed incredibly. The defense was the problem, but like offensively, they shot 51% from the field, 40.7% from the three. They made 11 for 27 from three, and then they made 15 of 16 free throws. So like offensively, they did what you want them to do. I think I had talked to you and Greg kind of offline throughout the game about, RJ Barrett had a great looking stat line, but he did have, 6 turnovers. And to me, some of those turnovers were like absolutely awful. And even, he went 9 for 15 shooting and starting the game. Some of those misses were just egregious. I think his first attempt of the game was, a little floater in the lane, and he just completely missed the rim from maybe a foot and a half away. So some of that was concerning, but it was good to see him turn things around as the game progressed. At least in the shot making arena, I know he continued to have turnovers throughout the game. But the biggest kind of thing that I took away from his performance is he did go 6 for 6 from the free throw line, which is something that he's been working on a lot. So that was very encouraging, and it was despite the fact that the Celtics set their franchise record for threes made, this was a close game until the waning minutes of the fourth quarter. So that was, promising.
Yeah. And I think, to your point about like box score watching versus actually watching the games, I mean, RJ Barrett scoring 27 points on 15 field goal attempts it's elite for him. Like that is almost unheard of. But again, to your point, like we watched those 6 turnovers. Some of those led to wide open threes in critical moments for the Celtics. It was really, some of those were absolutely devastating, like backbreaking type of turnovers. And so, and he also missed that wide open left-handed layup. I think Mike Breen called him seething like multiple times after that. So like, I'm not trying to be critical. You're going to take a 27-point game from RJ and that kind of efficiency. It's just cleaning up. There are times when he looks like he has predetermined what he wants to do, and he's not reacting to the defense. He's kind of just trying to impose his will, and it really it doesn't work at this level. So you have to really be able to be in tune with what the defense is doing and kind of react to that. Julius Randle put up 29 points on 19 shots, made all of his free throws. He looked good as well. Like this was he played 40 minutes. It was a big Randle game. He was really aggressive, especially without the defensive enforcer in the middle for Boston. And Jalen Brunson, 22 points, 10 assists to no turnovers. Like he's really impressive. Like I think he was the best. He had a third quarter that was, the shot making was unreal. Like the mid-range stuff, the footwork, everything about it was unbelievable. So that was all offensively. Like those are your big 3 players. Like that's who you need to be efficient between Randle, Barrett, and Brunson. We got that last night. It's just it happened to coincide with both the Celtics' hot shooting night and the Knicks maybe playing their worst defensive game I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, so just one more point to add on to what you're saying about Jalen Brunson, because if I had checked out the box score, it would have assumed that he was the leading scorer on the team, and it's a very keep in mind that he was playing against primarily Marcus Smart, who was the defensive player of the year last year. So like the fact that he got such great looks, and at times he just made Marcus Smart look a little bit silly on defense. Like that's just something incredible to watch. And he has been so far this season one of the most entertaining, basketball players for me to watch, just because he does it with such craftiness and such great footwork that it's just, I enjoy it. And but maybe I'm a homer, Tom.
No, I think you're right. And I think that part of what makes it so impressive is that no one's creating for him, right? Like these are all self-created points. Whereas I think RJ Barrett had, he was the beneficiary of a lot of kickouts and things like that, many of them from Jalen Brunson. And, that's part of the reason why Julius Randle is unable to be efficient, is because he has to create so much of his own offense. The impressive part by Jalen Brunson is that he's able to create his own offense and be efficient at the same time. No one else on this team can really do that. So I think that that's what kind of sets him apart. And frankly, that's why Jalen Brunson's the best player on this team. I don't even think that's like really a debate at this point.
I wouldn't debate you, and I think that's I don't know if it made it into the last or the preseason pod, but I think both of you and I had suggested that if someone from the Knicks were to make the All-Star game, we thought that Jalen Brunson was the most likely candidate. Which it it's it's interesting, right? Because he just got this new contract, which a lot of people said he was overpaid. He's making less than R.J. Barrett, and Julius Randle was second team All NBA 2 years ago, and here we are saying like I think it's pretty clear cut that right now Jalen Brunson is the best player on this team.
Yeah, no question. So Kenny, we've got a little gimmicky thing here. I've got some stats here. We're 9 games into the season. Knicks are 4-5. That's it's over 10% of the season is in the books. Like we're not dealing with tiny sample sizes anymore. So I want to throw some kind of team-wide stats at you and get a sense of whether you think that these numbers are going to hold, if you think that they're a little misleading, or kind of just get a gut check on these. So the first one is just high level basic stats. The Knicks offense ranks 17th in the league right now. Do you think that place in the league is a fair representation of this Knicks offense, or do you think going forward that may change?
I feel like that's pretty fair. I mean, I think again, going back to the preseason pod where we picked things, I picked them to do 15th or better. So I think right in that range seems likely. They have been, pushing the pace a lot more this year, and I've tweeted a lot about it. That every time it changes, they have a lot of guys on their team who are kind of fit for running fast break. Cam Reddish, R.J. Barrett, to some extent, Jalen Brunson, and then they have guys like Hartenstein who are good at kicking off the break. Obi Toppin, Derrick Rose, all of these guys, like they are kind of built for the break, which is why I thought there would be such a huge increase this season from I don't remember where we said they finished last year, but it was towards the bottom of the league because they were towards the bottom of the league in pace. So all of that to say, I think that is probably around where they likely are given the players that they have. But I said earlier in the season, I said in the preseason pod that I think they're gonna break the halfway mark and be above the 15th spot. So I'm hoping that they bump up a few spots, but I wouldn't expect kind of a huge jump in either direction.
Yeah, I think like part of this conversation goes back to what we were saying about Jalen Brunson being the best player. Like I'm just looking at some on-off stats here, and the Knicks offense is about 19 points per 100 possessions better when Jalen Brunson plays versus when he sits. And that kind of conversely means that when he sits, we've got the backup point guards in. The Knicks offense absolutely tanks when Derrick Rose and Emmanuel Quickley are in the game, and when Brunson's on the bench. So like that, I mean, Derrick Rose has been uncommonly bad for his standards. He looked a little better against Boston, but even then there's something a little off with his game right now. I don't know if he's rounding into form or if this is just the effects of him aging. And then quickly his shot's just been broken this season for some reason. I'm hoping that's small sample stuff because we can't afford the offense to just absolutely go in the toilet every time Jalen Brunson sits. So that's kind of what my one concern and why I think 17th might end up being fair. Yeah. So Kenny, the next stat that I had for you here is the Knicks defense. And it's that the Knicks right now rank 18th in the league defensively. Does that number surprise you? Do you think that is, do you think that's fair, or do you think that that's going to either go up or down as the season progresses?
That is interesting. I guess it makes sense because they have had good games, they have had bad games, and I know you said this is not so much a tiny sample size, but it's still about 10% of the season. And that Celtics game was wild in terms of what was happening, and it just seems like such an outlier, and I think it might skew the stats slightly. But I would expect, just given that this is a Thiibs team and this is, his calling card is defense, that would they would tick up and be, likely, I would guess, in the top 10. I think in the last few years, 2 years ago, they were, I think, between 1 and 3 throughout the season. Last year, they started out pretty slowly, but I think they still finished in the top 10. You can check if I'm wrong on that. And I would expect kind of the similar thing this year, although again, with the increased pace, I think that might decrease the defense a little bit, just because you are spending a lot more energy offensively, and giving up, and that exposes you sometimes when you're trying to get in the break for easy buckets for the other team. So I think their defense, I would expect it to improve. I would guess around 10 is where I would put them at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you, and I think that a big part of that is going to be, it appears that Evan Fournier is being kind of phased out of the rotation to an extent. And as Quentin Grimes comes back, we should have probably mentioned that Quentin Grimes started against Philadelphia. He didn't play a great deal of minutes. I believe he played, I have it right here, he played just 15 minutes that game, just 0-1 from the field, and the Knicks got crushed while he was in. But he's obviously going to round into form. He's going to get time, and then we saw Cam Reddish start in the game against the Celtics, and so that's kind of where it looks like they're going with at the 2 or the 3. Like, they're going to have a bigger defensive-minded wing. And Evan Fournier, I mean, he got 10 minutes against the Celtics, and Quentin Grimes didn't even play. Like, that's granted, he played terribly. Fournier did, but I don't know, man. Like, I'm looking again at the on-off numbers, and the Knicks defense is it's 10.5 points per 100 possessions better when Fournier is on the bench. Like, when he plays, our defense is garbage. And when he sits, it's actually very good. It's among the best defenses in the league. So you don't put it all on Fournier. Like, that's kind of the case with all of our starters. Like, the defense with Randle's defensive numbers are even worse. But Evan Fournier has proven that he is not a good defender. He provides zero in the way of, keeping his opponents out of the paint and walling off drives. So I'm expecting that the fewer minutes Fournier gets, kind of the better the defense is going to look.
Yeah, and I would say that this is something that, again, I don't know if it made it into the preseason pod, but it's something that we talked about in terms of fit. And it's why I think both of us said that, Grimes should be the starter, because, he is a better defensive player, and Fournier, his ability to create shots for himself is better on the bench where they don't have as many creators, and his weakness defensively can be hidden a little more against second units than it can be against first units. So, I agree with kind of all of those points. And at the same time, what we saw in the Celtics game is when you have these kind of shifts in the lineup, there are some growing pains, because I think there was, you pointed it out on Twitter, there was a lot of miscommunication. There was a lot of people not knowing kind of what the other guy was going to do, and I think part of that stems from not playing a ton of minutes together prior to Mitchell Robinson got injured, and so Hartenstein was taking a lot of his minutes, and then Cam Reddish coming in. And I don't put too much stock in Grimes not playing last game. I think it was the second out of a back-to-back and him coming off of injury, so I think that had a lot to do with it. But like Cam Reddish stepping into that role rather than putting Fournier back in, I think there's some chemistry and communication that needs to be built over time, and I think it will be built over time. I think there's just going to be some growing pains along the way.
And I like the idea of having kind of a bunch of big wings in the lineup, like starting both Reddish and RJ. That makes, basically, you're able to switch kind of 1 through 4. Like, Randle's a better switch defender than he is in drop coverage. Like, when he's actually engaged and on the ball, like, Randle can move his feet. We've seen it before. There were viral clips of him D'ing up Luka in years past. Like, he is mobile for his size. He's strong and he's competitive. It's just when he's off ball, that's when he can there are lapses. So, and then Jalen Brunson, we know similarly, like, though he's small, he's very stout. So it's like you can kind of switch a little bit 1 through 4 a little better. When you have Evan Fournier, it just doesn't work very well. So I'm interested to see that. We saw some switching against the Celtics. To your point, that didn't go great. But I think that, trying out a new scheme against the Celtics, who made it to the finals last year and who we caught on the wrong night, that's kind of a precarious spot. Like, you'd rather try out your switching defense against like the Orlando Magic or the Detroit Pistons. And it was trial by fire. They tried it against the Celtics. They got burned. And that happens. But I do like the kind of willingness to try something new on Thiibs' part, because that's something I've been critical of him in the past. And the fact that he was even willing to give something new a shot was good on him, Yeah. Next stat that I wanted to talk about, and this kind of goes in with the Celtics game. The Knicks rank dead last in opponent 3-pointers made per game and opponent 3-pointers attempted per game. I can't imagine that's surprising to you, but do you think that number is going to hold?
Again, like the defensive number that you said in terms of them being 17th, I can't imagine that this holds over time. Thiibs is a defensive minded coach, and I think that over time he's going to find a solution to this. I think in particular the Boston game of them just hitting a ridiculous, they hit, what was it, 26 threes, a franchise record, 27 threes, a franchise record. So like I just can't imagine. And again, like, not a tiny sample size, but a small enough sample size that 127 3 outing will skew it a little bit. But I can't imagine that sticking throughout the year. And it's just, like I said, Thiibs is a defensive minded coach, and they have some of the players that should be able to contest threes. I don't know if it's part of the defensive scheme that they're trying to pack it in a little more and prevent twos, but they've also gone up against some teams that shoot a decent amount of threes. I think the Celtics, I had the stat in front of me before and I have since put it away, so I'm going to talk slowly and see if I can pull it up, which I don't think I'm going to be able to.
Well, and if you can, just real quick, like it is definitely part of Thiibs' scheme to wall off the paint, like to funnel. You've got guys trying really the idea is to try and funnel guys to Mitchell Robinson. And so when Mitch isn't there, when we don't have like a rim protector like him there, I think that kind of throws his scheme off a little bit. But you do see a ton of overhelping in Thiibs' schemes. Like you've got guys like, it just stands out to me that Quickly will often be like over the midway point of the court when the ball's on the opposite side. And if there's a swing to the opposite corner, it is a real struggle for Quickly and guys like that. Cam Reddish got caught with it last night too, trying to get back out to that opposite corner. If there's like a whip pass, it's a real struggle. And that's just part of the scheme. It's just like guys are at the nail, guys are, under the basket helping. And it's just a lot of ground to cover. And so that's when you're trying to like run guys off the line. What we're seeing a lot now is just like guys taking one dribble, like throwing a pump fake, taking one dribble in place, one dribble to the side. And, it's not so much attacking closeouts as it's just like still getting open threes. Those used to be attacking closeouts back in the day. You'd throw a pump fake, a guy would fly by you, and then you'd go attack the rim and pull up in mid-range if you had to. That's not what's happening anymore. Guys are throwing the pump fake, taking one dribble to the side and draining threes. And that's just the league we're in now.
Yeah. And just again, like I feel like in the Celtics game in particular, there were just far too many wide open threes. And we talked a little bit about kind of it looked like there was a lot of miscommunication on the team. So like there's that creates a little bit of an outlier. But what I started to say and was poor at doing is that Boston right now is second in the NBA in 3-pointers attempted. Milwaukee is 5th in the NBA. And then, the 76ers are 11th and Memphis is 13th. So like they have faced 2 of their 9 opponents are top 5 in the leagues in terms of 3-point attempts. So like it might be a little of the, who you're playing against. That's the issue. And I just can't see us going throughout the season without, Thiibs making some sort of adjustment to get that number down.
Yeah, man. So we kind of touched on it earlier, this whole kind of trifecta of Cam Reddish, Quentin Grimes, and Evan Fournier. We've had 3 different starters at shooting guard in the last 3 games. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are. Like, do you think, and there's a little bit of a squeeze here, like, do you think that Fournier is going to get like, kind of whatever happened to Kemba Walker last season, taken out of the rotation. Can you see that happening with Fournier, or is his contract kind of too much for that to be the case? And if not, like, I don't know, what do you think the kind of minutes breakdown is going to be? Is it going to be ride the hot hand, or I don't know?
Yeah, and like if you had asked me before Fournier got benched, I would or got moved to the bench. He is still coming off of the bench, at least a little bit. I would have definitely said that like he's just going to be in the starting lineup because they did invest a lot of money in him, and he has proved to be an NBA caliber player. His fit on this team isn't great, and he is coming off of kind of a very long summer of playing basketball in Europe for Team France, where he was, by all accounts, one of the best players on Team France. That included, several NBA players. And so maybe there's a little bit of exhaustion there or something, but it it's so hard to say because like right now I could see kind of what happened to Kemba happening to him, where now that he is coming off the bench, you saw that with Grimes on the second night of a back-to-back, they didn't want to start him again and play him, so they put Cam Reddish in instead. And that would have been, if there was any question, Fournier would have gone back into that starting role. But like the fact that he didn't tells me that, they're pretty committed to him coming off the bench at this point. And then, like you said, when there's, a full 11 bodies in the rotation, someone is going to fall out. And, Cam Reddish has been hot and cold. Fournier has had, very few moments of hot, but like he is a more known quantity than Cam Reddish is. Like, and it's so hard to say, but like I would right now lean towards there is a possibility of him kind of getting squeezed out of the rotation, just based on the fact that Grimes and Cam, like he has played the worst, given that Grimes has only played maybe 15 minutes, and he was a minus 20 in those 15 minutes. I think that they're expecting better things out of him, and Cam Reddish has played better than Fournier at this point.
I mean, so do you put any stock into the whole like Grimes was kind of taken off the table in Donovan Mitchell conversations? So like you have to see what he's about. You have to give him time because of the organizational priorities.
I mean, I think I look at it the opposite way. I think the reason he was off the table is because you think that he is a good player. And if you think that he's a good player, and last season he was a good defender, he was a good shooter, and that's stuff that the Knicks need from their, starting 2 or 3, depending on what you label RJ as. So I think that that's the reason he's going to get minutes. And because you think all of those things, that is why he was off limits. So like, I don't think because he was taken off the table there that you have to play him. I think that you're going to play him because you think that he's a good player. And so even if he struggles to start with, I think, what he showed last year and everything kind of, that he adds in terms of like what I was just saying, that Fournier doesn't really fit with this team. He adds to a lot of the issues that the Knicks are trying to address. So I think he's going to get those minutes.
Yeah. So who would you start, Reddish or Grimes? Both are healthy. Both are healthy, and like Grimes is rounded back into form.
I would start Grimes. Again, I think that and it's something that we talked about a lot, and we talked about it with Fournier rather than Cam Reddish. But I think Grimes' shooting ability, defensive ability, and his ability to not need the ball in his hands helps. We've seen from Cam Reddish a lot that when he gets the ball, like he tries to create on his own. And again, like that is something that, would be more useful for him off the bench, just because we have RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, all needing the ball in their hands. So if you add in Quentin Grimes and when he's healthy, Mitchell Robinson, as guys who don't need the ball and can kind of, space the floor in different ways, then I think that is a much better unit than it is with, another creator who, has some defensive liabilities on the other end.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm with you. Get Grimes in the starting lineup. Give Reddish a lot of minutes, though. I mean, a lot is relative, I guess, but Reddish has earned playing time. He's earned to be a solid part of this rotation. Again, I would not have guessed that coming into this season. Let's just say that much. And there have been moments in this season where he's a really tough player to gauge, but defensively, man, like he does seem to lock in. He's so long and he's got really quick hands. Breen mentioned that on the broadcast last night. Like he does a lot of deflections, a lot of steals, and just a lot of dynamic plays that you don't really see from some other guys. Like from I'm just like comparing him to like RJ Barrett defensively. Cam Reddish is kind of on a different level right now. And
Yeah, but
so
I mean I agree with that most of the time, but there are some times when like he just completely looks like he spaces. Like there's
yeah,
times when guys just like drive by him offensively, and then when he is on offense, he has taken some of the worst shots I have seen. And
absolutely.
so it's just like you said, it's hard to gauge because there's sometimes when he does some great things, and if he were to become more consistent in avoiding some of those maddening plays, I think it would be a lock to be in that position. But because those things happens, it's just like, does that open the door a little bit for a guy like Fournier, who's a good high volume 3-point shooter, to kind of sneak into that position?
Cam's hard to talk about, man. I never seem to like actually articulate what I want to when I'm talking about Cam Reddish.
It
A real enigma.
Yeah, it's like we've said, it's all over the place. There's some great stuff, there's some phenomenal stuff, and then there's some stuff that just makes you scratch your head. And it you'd like him to find some happy medium in the middle.
All right, so I think the last kind of rotation thing I want to talk about. I mean, I'm a little curious about the Derrick Rose situation. Like, if we think he's going to continue getting minutes, his minutes are way down from last year. But I don't know. I guess we can start there. Any thoughts on Derrick Rose and his place in the rotation? Do you think it's up for grabs a little?
I don't think so. Unless you think that, because Thiibs is going to stick with 10. And I don't, IQ has been very good at some things this season. He has been not as good at other things. So I think Derrick Rose is going to stick as your backup point guard. I think they're just kind of bringing him along slowly after he was injured all of last year. And like I said earlier, like it surprises me that he has been the Knicks have been so poor with him out there offensively, just because he has had spurts, and he has had, it seemed to me as though most of the time when I see him in there, he was, getting to the rim and getting some pretty good shots, and stepping up and hitting threes at a pretty consistent clip. So from watching the games rather than looking at the stat sheet, I would say that he is pretty firmly in there. I think they do have enough confidence in IQ that I don't think his minutes are going to be huge this season. I think it's better for him if he's playing a more limited role, just because we've seen in the past where he's gotten injured a lot. So like I think that is a calculated move. I don't think it's any indication that he is not going to be a part of this rotation.
Yeah, I'm with that, and all the Rose and Thiibs history there. I think that's there's a lot there. So I think the last thing I want to get into is probably the most exciting thing that a lot of people want to talk about is Randle and Obi's minutes. The fact that we saw Randle and Obi together against the 76ers and how successful that was. Obi then went on to only play just under, was it under 15 minutes? He played, yeah, just under 15 minutes in the Celtics game. And that was a situation where, Mitchell Robinson wasn't playing. So you had Julius Randle playing the backup five, essentially. You would think that would have meant more Obi Toppin minutes. That wasn't the case against Boston. So I think for all the hope that Philly game gave you, that these two could play together, I think that just the fact that his minutes total was so low in the following game may have kind of dampened that a little. But what do you think? You like these two playing together? You like what you saw against Philly, or is it kind of more situational?
I think it's definitely a situational thing, and I think Knicks fans, just based on what I've seen on Twitter, are a little too excited about this possibility, because you did see it a decent amount in the 76ers game, and you did see it in the Boston game for a little while, where they had Randle and Obi playing. But in both games, the team they were playing didn't have their starting center. So the Celtics were putting out Noah Vonleh, former Knick great, and Grant Williams in the center position, and that kind of gives you the ability to play Julius Randle at the center. And then the 76ers were playing Paul Reed and Montrezl Harrell. So again, that gives you the ability to go a little smaller. But I think normally, we've talked about it before, that Thiibs likes to have a traditional center in there. So I think it's something that's going to happen more than I would have expected at the beginning of the season, just based on what we've seen so far. But I think it's definitely going to be situational.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we shouldn't get our hopes up too much, but it did look good against Philly. So in the right situation, that is a definite plus. And it's nice that Thiibs again was even willing to try it because that hasn't always been his MO. So good on him again. Even though I think he should probably do it a little bit more often or just have more faith in Obi in general.
Yeah, and I think let me just jump in right there. I think that might be part of it. I think they are bringing and Thiibs is known for not really depending too much on his young guys that are developing. And I think that might have been part of the reason why Obi did not see as many minutes against the Celtics because he was not having a great shooting game. I think he, contributed in other ways. And, he has kind of maybe earned some more leeway, but I think, Thiibs goes with what he knows. And what he knows is that, Julius Randle right now is the better player. And Julius Randle, by all accounts against the Celtics, was having a pretty good game. So, you had to stick with that. The other thing that was happening in the Celtics game is that the Knicks were getting killed on the boards, and Hartenstein, as a traditional center, like kind of gives them the ability to grab a few more of those rebounds. Whereas Obi has been a little inconsistent. Hartenstein,
yeah. Obi's really struggled to grab defensive boards. Yeah, it's been rough.
But as I'm actually looking at the stats, it looks like the Knicks actually out rebounded the Celtics by 34 to. Knicks had 44, Celtics had 34. So maybe that was part of it because Hartenstein had 14. But to me, watching the game, it looked like they were struggling a little bit more to get rebounds, but maybe I was misinterpreting that.
No, but like on the season, I'm looking at Cleaning the Glass right now. Obi Toppin ranks in the 15th percentile among bigs for defensive rebounding. Like he just doesn't grab a bunch of defensive boards.
Yeah,
and I feel like the team also. I mean, this is why Thiibs benches him. You're right to call that out. Noah Vonleh was grabbing rebounds over him. Like when that's happening, it's time to sit. At least certainly in Thiibs' eyes. So I'm with you there.
Yeah, and I think, and maybe I had assumed that Boston was out rebounding us, but it might just be because I am so used to watching Mitchell Robinson grab every rebound that is available that like when the Knicks were not grabbing every single rebound, it looked to me like they were being beat. But I think that's kind of my thoughts on why Obi didn't play a little more in that Celtics game.
Well, listen, man, I've got a crying baby over here, so let's make some predictions. Let's get out of here. And we've had some tech issues, but I think we've weathered them okay. So Kenney, the upcoming week, we've got 4 games. We've got one at Minnesota, one at Brooklyn, then we're at home against Detroit and OKC. How are you feeling about these 4 games? What do you think?
I think they got to win against Detroit. I would like to win against Minnesota, and then OKC. It's unclear to me what's going on there. Like, are they trying to win? Are they trying to tank? Like, SGA has been incredible. I'm gonna call it an even split. I didn't mention it, but I'd also like to beat the Nets because, reasons. I was going to swear, but now that we're on video, I don't want to swear anymore. So I'm gonna call for a 2-2 week. I want to beat Detroit. I would like to beat Brooklyn, and then we'll call it 3-1, and then one of Minnesota and Oklahoma City. 3-1. I just talked myself into it.
Nice. I like 3. I mean, the Thunder. I mean, that's optimistic. Like the Thunder are 4-5. Like they're decent right now. Timberwolves are 5-5. Again, those are 2 like fine teams. I would like to think the Thunder at home, we could take care of business there. That may just be optimistic thinking, but I like both those home games for us. Going on the road to Minnesota could be a struggle, but going to Brooklyn is almost like a home game with some of those crowds. Not as much energy as there is at MSG, but I could see 3-1 this week, and we'd be having a very different conversation. I think there'd be a lot of optimism coming out of a 3-1 week. You wanna both go for that?
Yeah, I'll go for 3-1.
Let's do it. All right. Well, listen, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for, bearing with us for any tech difficulties we had. We're putting out more content. We've been putting out Instagram stuff, been putting out a lot of videos. We're on YouTube now. Please go subscribe to us on YouTube at Talkin Knicks. We're trying to just do more stuff. And
more stuff.
So far, so good. So yeah, if you can subscribe to us on your your podcast apps. Give us a rating, review, all that stuff, all the likes, all the thumbs. We appreciate it. Thanks for listening. And hey, let's go Knicks.
Knicks take.